In the year 2005, there was a young woman named Ashley Smith who had just found out that she lost custody of her children. She was living in Georgia, and she was absolutely devastated. She had recently, while she had had a number of really good and positive years, she had suffered a really difficult relapse, and now it seemed like her life had completely changed. All the things that seemed to be possible and to matter had seemed to poof, and now she was left not knowing where she was going in her life. She was given a copy of a book that at the time was a relatively unknown book, and it was a devotional book, and it was inspirational, Christian in nature, and she started reading it. And even though she was going through all sorts of horrible stuff and her addiction was now ongoing, she was in a horrible relapse with ongoing drug and alcohol use. Ashley started reading this book, and she made a daily habit. She got up each morning and she read from the book and prayed and said, God, would you show me what your purpose for my life is? I'm feeling very stuck. I'm feeling very confused by what should happen next. I want things to change. I can't. Help me, God. And she began reading this book that talked about purpose, and she started realizing, hey, maybe God does have a plan and a purpose for me, and she had now this new rhythm in her life. And one morning she woke up and she was ready to do this, and unbeknownst to her, a man had gone to a courthouse and done a mass shooting, and a number of people were dead, and now he ran away and broke into her apartment, and for the next 7 hours she was held hostage, completely unexpectedly. And now she was sitting and feeling like her situation not only had gone bad to worse, but would she even make it out of this situation at all? As the minutes turned into hours, she realized that everything she had been reading in that devotional book could apply to the situation she was going through. And after a few hours, she realized that the person holding her captive must be hungry. And so she offered to make him breakfast. And he accepted, and so she began making breakfast. And then as they were eating, they were chatting a little bit. And she said, you know, I have this book I read each day. Would you allow me just to, I know I'm here being held, would you allow me just to read it right now? It really means a lot to me. And he allowed it. And then she got bold, and she said, in fact, could I read some of it out loud so both of us can hear it? I think we could both benefit from it. And he said, yes, that would be fine. And so they started reading this book together. And it talked about purpose and having a life's purpose and seeing that we all have the opportunity to live for something greater, for Jesus' plan for our life. And then she said to him, what if God's purpose for you today is to turn yourself in, to accept all the penalties of all your crimes, to go to prison, to accept Jesus, and to minister to people there? Maybe that is his purpose. Maybe what has gotten us to this point, God can work through even that. And the day resolved, Ashley was set free. Brian went to jail. And the book that they were reading, when the press heard this story, became a national bestseller sensation, partly because of this story. It's a book called The Purpose-Driven Life. It's the idea of having a greater purpose in our lives than just all the things that we can lean to that are common. Rick Warren wrote this book, and I want to show you what he said. He put it this way. He said that no matter what happens, everybody eventually surrenders to something or to someone. If not to God, you will surrender to the opinions or expectations of others, to money, to resentment, to fear, to your own pride, lust, or ego. You are free to choose what you surrender to, but you're not free from the consequences of that choice. And that is what we're going to look at today. Everybody eventually surrenders to something or someone. We eventually have a purpose. Research was done a couple years ago. APA put out a wonderful article, and they totally agree with what Rick Warren said. They put it this way: purpose is our central self-organizing life aim. It's evaluated on strength, scope, and awareness. In other words, I'm going to ask you what your life's purpose is today. What have you made your primary purpose? For many of us, The self-organizing life aim, the direction we go in, is all about meeting expectations. Maybe meeting expectations of your family. People expect things of me. I cannot let them down. I have let them down. I don't want to let them down again. A work situation, a boss, co-workers, meeting expectations, treating the client the right way, following all the things so that I do all that. The expectations of my very busy schedule. Some of us come to today, and our calendars, not only are they full, but we got more things to add, don't we? And life becomes all about meeting the expectations of my calendar. For others, it's about reconciling the past. Hey, something happened. Maybe I did it. Maybe it was done to me. Maybe it was done around me. But the point is, something happened in the past, and now I don't know a lot about today, and I want to figure it out. And that becomes my aim. For others, it becomes about feeling as good as possible, as much of the time as is possible. I don't need to explain that one. We're all good 21st century Americans. We know what it means to try to have it your way. But the invitation today, we're going to finish a book that the Apostle Paul writes, a letter to the Philippians. And our invitation is, let's make our primary purpose living for Jesus. Seeing that individuals are put in our lives by God, they have value, we can always seek and build and grow in community, and that the gospel has incredible power. I'd like to invite you to open up the 4th chapter of Philippians. If you brought a Bible, if you didn't, there's Bibles in the seats. We're only doing 3 verses because the letter is over. 14 weeks in, and we finally made it. We've gotten to the end. Paul has written from jail. He is showing that his joy in Jesus is not a meme, it's not a bumper sticker, it's not a t-shirt, it is real. It is a gift from the Lord, and he's writing to this colony of Philippi, and he has now shown them, hey, this is what it means to have real joy, humility, follow Jesus, press on, we can do all things through the Lord, etc. And now we come to the end. And now we come to what could be seen as a just final greeting. Hey, love you all, bye-bye, see you soon, hugs and kisses, Apostle Paul, right? And truthfully, this is a customary ending to a letter. If we gloss through, you might see it like that. But I want to show you that the Apostle Paul in this section, these last 3 verses, is going to give us the blueprint for living a life where we embrace our purpose. We're in verse 21. Here's what he says. Give my greetings to each of God's holy people, all who belong to Christ Jesus. The brothers who are with me send you their greetings. And all the rest of God's people send you greetings too, especially those in Caesar's household. May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with your spirit. Ending Philippians, Paul gives a blueprint. Through Christ, we can embrace our true purpose, and it starts with seeing that through Christ, we can value every individual. That God puts individual in our lives. Through Christ, we can realize people are not fuzzy groups. People are not just random conglomerations, and I kind of interact with them, but I focus on me. But every single individual, every person is made in the image of God, and every Christian is a child of God. That's an incredible, incredible gift to be able to value each individual. Notice what he says here. Give my greetings to each of God's holy people. What does he not say? What could Paul have said? So he's writing in jail. He's in a situation where he's just made all these big ideas, and we've looked at it for 14 weeks, 4 chapters in, and now he doesn't say, hey, give my best to everybody, I love them all. Because he understood that in the ancient world, letters like this were written in a way where they were shared circularly, where if he wrote to the Philippian church, they would take the letter, and now they'd read it and share it, and different people would hear it. And he knew there was power of making sure, hey, I'm not talking to a group here. I'm talking to individuals. I'm talking to specific people who all matter. And every person, I've been praying for each person. I care about each person. They matter to me because that's what Jesus asked me to do. It'd be like if you wrote a letter to a group of people, and rather than saying, hey, all of you, love you all, hey, I've been praying for you. And my friend here, I'd like to see you soon. I'm praying for you as well. I love you. And you do good work. And he wanted to make sure that every individual member of the church of Philippi heard that not only that he valued them, but Jesus values them. Part of living a life of purpose, embracing our purpose, is seeing that the world and the culture conditions us to anonymously treat people as groups where we have a chance to be countercultural and see people as individuals. And it often happens that this happens over time to us. Workplaces are often what get us like this. For example, when I was a young school teacher, I learned very quickly that when I stepped into a classroom, it was much easier to deal with the class as a group than a collection of individuals, for a number of reasons. And so what I learned very quickly is that I would go into a group, good morning, boys and girls, good morning, friends, how are you all doing? When I said goodbye, I would say bye to all of them. Why? Well, one of the factors was I had kids, I was a special ed teacher, and I had kids with behaviors, and sometimes if I'd greet each individual, I'd get my head bitten off. I'd have someone scream at me, why are you talking to me? Why are you acknowledging my existence? So it became a lot easier to just talk to the class, do my teaching, grade my papers, everybody move on. Problem, that was a creeping mindset that started creeping into the way I treated my coworkers. And so I'd be in a meeting in a room and we'd all be there and I'd treat everybody as a big group and not understand the importance of individuals. And it creeped into all areas of my life. And then one day, if you remember, I said that there was a particular student who'd like to bite my head off when I talked to the student. One day, that student was no longer attending school. And that student lived in a program. And another teacher and I were appointed to go do a home visit and figure out why was the student not attending school? How could we get the kid to come back to school? And I was really frustrated because the teacher they assigned me to was one of those people that I just was around, but I didn't know. I saw this person every day, but I didn't have any sort of personal relationship with. And I started panicking. I went on maps, and it was 22 minutes from the school to where we were going. What was I going to talk about for 22 minutes? This was going to be incredibly awkward, and could you believe I have two very good friends at the school, and they're both in special ed. Why couldn't I have been paired with one of them? And then I jumped to the next level where I started making all these judgments, totally unfounded, about this person and about why I shouldn't be with this person in my brain. And still the day came where I had to do the 22-minute car ride. And we got in the car, and you know what I learned? My coworker was a normal person with normal things. She liked music, different music than me, but we listened to some of her music and talked about it. She had a son. Her son had interests. She loved her son. She was just a person who matters and who was part of our community. And then when we got there, you know the person who was effective in talking to the kid who was refusing school? Not this guy. She was the superhero. She was the one who was able to get through. And then on the way back, we had another just normal conversation because I was dealing with a person. And I had turned the whole thing into this whole weird thing about me. And I had gotten all just frustrated and anxious and nervous when truthfully, I just needed to treat my coworker like a person and not like a fuzzy avatar. Here's the question for you, 2 parts. Number 1, of the people that God has placed in your life, because have you thought about that? The people in your life, God has allowed that to happen. The ones you like, the ones you find really annoying, and everyone in between, okay? Of the people God has in your life, who have you not gotten to know? And then, question 2. The person that you haven't gotten to know, who you see every day, who you have access to, what could and will change when you start treating that person as an individual, when you start getting to know that person, when you start realizing that through Christ you can value each individual? Because Paul's showing us there's a shift here. We need to go from being people who are isolated to be people who build and seek community, to be people who through Christ we value community. Through Christ we reject isolation. That's the next part of what we have here. Through Christ, I will reject isolation. Paul puts it this way. He's sitting in jail. Anybody want to voluntarily go to jail? Of course not. But there he is, and now he could be miserable. Now he could be frustrated and angry, and why, God, have you done this to me? And why are we here? And it's so upsetting. And Lord, I've planted churches for you. I've risked my neck for you, and why? I don't deserve this. But instead, look what he says. The brothers who are with me send you their greetings. What does that mean? In the first century, in Roman jails, Paul was put there not because he had done something wrong. He was being persecuted for his faith. It was illegal to go against the Roman cult and to instead follow these other religions. This was one of them. Now he's there. And now he realizes he can create his Christian community in his jail cell. Some of his jailers come to faith. Some of his friends visit him, and what we see is a picture of a person who has chosen that isolation can be completely rejected, that a jail cell doesn't have to lead to isolation. A jail cell is just a different circumstance. Because, think about it. Think of the person you know who is the most isolated. Think about that person for a moment. Did that person wake up one day and say, wow, I'd really like to be isolated and cut off and shut off from everybody? Of course not. The road to isolation is paved by 1,000,001 little steps. The road to isolation is about things I do, opportunities I decline, habits I form, conclusions I jump to, decisions I make, decisions I don't make, etc. 1,000,000 little baby steps. And so all of us stand here with these two roads. It's always very much a binary choice. Am I going to go towards isolation or am I going to go towards community? We stand here and we really just say, am I going to make decisions today that are going to bring me in the category of isolation and I'm going to lean in that way, or am I going to make choices today that are going to bring me closer to community? Isolating is burying my head in the sand, disconnecting, pulling myself away from God, pulling myself away from others. Community is realizing that with God's help, we can do things far greater together. So let me give a silly example of the way I've seen this recently. I was sitting in an airport. I was heading to Louisville, Kentucky, and my plane got delayed. Not for 1, but for 7 hours. And they changed our gate, not 1 time, but 6 times. And very quickly what happened is a community formed. It was amazing. I was watching this with my own eyes. None of us knew each other. We weren't all traveling to something together. But when you have the shared experience of a bunch of people stuck at an airport, frustrated in Boston because we want to get to Kentucky, and now you change our gate a bunch of times, now 2 groups of people emerge. The isolators and the community builders. And there's some people who just look like they've been punched in the gut for 7 hours, and they just look like deer in the headlights, put the AirPods in, want nothing to do with anything. And I had my AirPods with me, I had my Napoleon biography, I had my laptop, I had everything I needed to go in that category. And then there were others who just wanted to talk about it. There was a lady there who she was so worried because she wanted to get to her dog, because she had a dog sitter for the morning but not the afternoon. And she didn't need me to do any huge grandiose things. She just wanted to talk a little bit about how she loved her dog and was worried and wanted to get to her dog in Kentucky. And I realized very quickly I could lean in one way or the other. Here's the question we ask. All of us have moments every single day where we either lean to isolation or lean towards community. There's really no middle ground. Everything we do takes us in one direction. Everything we do results in us being a little more isolated or a little more community focused. Which way do you naturally lean? Honest self-evaluation. I naturally lean towards isolation. If you give me the chance to go be a hermit, I will happily do it. Thank you. In Jesus' name, here we go. But the problem is that's not good for me. That's not good for my soul. And that is not life-giving. It doesn't lead to human flourishing for me or for anyone around me. Some of us in this room gravitate and naturally are bent towards isolation. Some of us, though, thank God, do lean towards community builders. Some of us are natural connectors. And so the question now is, can we all realize, okay, let's take an honest self-evaluation. Which way do you lean? And I want to point something out. You could say, oh, this is the idea of extroverts and introverts. No, no, no. This is the idea of isolation and community. Monks, do you know what a monk is? A monk is a person who takes a vow of poverty, lives, and has a quiet, contemplative life. They have a community, right? So a bunch of introverted monks making cheese and praying to God, they still have their community. So it's not a question of introvert, extrovert. It's a question of, do I lean isolated or do I lean community? If you want to embrace your true purpose, God's true purpose is for you to be part of wonderful community, the church, your family, in your workplace, in your marriage, in your parenting. Community is possible everywhere. Community is possible in the supermarket. You can get to know the person at the meat counter you talk to every day. You don't have to know that person's everything. You can know the person's name, and you can pray for that person. Do you lean towards isolation? Do you lean towards community? Okay. Those first two are really positive and really powerful. And we want to say, God, I want to embrace your purpose for my life. But there's something in the text I want to point out to you. I read these couple verses, and there is a plot twist in the text. I don't know if you caught it. Plot twists are great. Plot twists often make movies, and they often are what show us they're the most memorable thing. For example, I've always loved Star Wars. Any Star Wars fans here? Anybody? Okay. Some people say there's 9 Star Wars movies or 11 Star Wars movies. If you add in the 2 bad Ewok movies from the 80s, there's 13, etc., right? For me, there's always been 2. Why have there only been 2? Well, the first movie is called Star Wars, not A New Hope. They changed the title later. And the second movie is called Empire Strikes Back. Let me tell you why I reject Return of the Jedi. You ready for this? Any movie where they think it's appropriate to put Darth Vader and Muppets in the same movie is not a film worth watching. We reject it in this church in Jesus' name. Okay. So the reason Empire Strikes Back is great is because the plot twist changes the way you look at everything in Star Wars. It's been 45 years. The movie came out in 1980. I'm going to spoil it. If I'm spoiling the movie for you, you've had 45 years. I'm sorry. I'm 36 years old. You missed the boat on this one, okay? All right. So at the end of Empire Strikes Back, Luke, the hero, gets his hand cut off, and Darth Vader, the villain, shouts at him, "I am your father," right? So now we have this big reveal that the bad guy is the dad of the good guy. And it's a twist. But even more than just getting our attention, it changes the way we look at the rest of Star Wars. You go back and you watch the first Star Wars movie, and suddenly you're like, wait, everything's different now. This all means something totally different. Because a plot twist can change the way we look at everything that comes before it. You with me on that? There's something like that in the text. I want to read it to you. Here's Paul at the end of this letter. The rest of God's people send you greetings too, especially those in Caesar's household. Who's Caesar? The Roman Emperor Caesar. It was actually Nero at this point. Anybody ever hear of Nero, burning the city down? Anyhow, so Caesar, someone in his household, someone in the imperial palace, has come to faith in Jesus, and Paul waits till the very end to let us know. And it leads to this idea that through Christ, I will say, I can realize the gospel's power. I can realize that there seem to be shut off places in the world. Let's take Caesar's palace, okay? Caesar's palace at the center of the Roman Empire was seen as the seat of everything, of all earthly power. And for the Philippian Christians, it seems to run counterpoint to everything they believe in. Why? They live in a place where at Philippi, the big deal was everybody has Roman citizenship. And it was a huge deal. And now they're all saying, wow, I have to be a citizen of heaven, not of Rome, of the earth. And so they're looking at everything about Caesar's palace just represents the opposite of what they're going for. They're afraid. They know that Caesar's palace could lead to their crushing and everything. And they're just sitting and saying, this is one of the shut-off places of the world. This is the darkest place we can imagine. It stands in total opposition to everything we believe, and nothing good can come out of there. And Paul says, so a couple of the Christians in Caesar's palace send you their greetings. Here's the point here. There are shut-off places in the world that are not actually shut off. When we embrace our true purpose, the power of the gospel can go to those places, and each of us has access to them. Each of us has the ability to get there. Now, you may wonder, how did the gospel get to Caesar's household? Two theories. Theory number one, if you read Acts 16, you read about a woman named Lydia. Lydia is a seller of purple cloth. Purple is the color of imperial power. Purple is the color of royalty. And in the first century, you could only get purple cloth, purple dye, from a specific pigment found in a snail. And the emperor declared a monopoly on that dye. And so what we wonder is maybe Lydia had a connection with the imperial palace, and she was able to use that access to bring the gospel to Caesar's household. Maybe. Theory number two. There was something in the first century really bad. It was called slavery, okay? In slavery, people were treated as property. If you were a slave, you didn't get to pick your assignment. You got sold to where you were sold to. And families were pulled apart. Another theory is that there were slaves at Philippi who came to faith in Christ, who were related to slaves in Caesar's household, and they used that access to get the message there. We don't know, but the point is, someone used their access. I think of it like a key card. You know a key card? A key card is issued to you, and now you have the ability to get into a shut-off place. For example, I walk into a hospital. I wear my little minister badge, but am I allowed into the operating room? No, I don't have access. If I walked into the operating room, what would they do? They'd call security and kick me out, right? Because I don't have access. I don't have authorization to go to that shut-off place. Who has access to go there? A doctor, a nurse, a PA, etc., right? So there are people who do have access. The idea we want to see here is that the gospel is so powerful, and part of embracing our purpose is seeing that God gives us access to shut-off places, and for each of us, every single one of us gathered in this church has access to places that are shut off. I'll give you three categories. Category number one, a closed family system. Some of us are part of family systems that are closed groups, aren't we? We have a culture, we have traditions, and there's us, and there's everybody else. And there's unsaved people in our family system. We have access. We can share the gospel with how we live and the choices we make and the words we use. And we can certainly share the gospel verbally. We'll share it. Ready? God created the world. It was good. Sin's the problem. We're powerless over it. Jesus came into the world, lived a perfect life, died on our behalf, rose again. We now get to have a choice. We respond, and we can say, Lord, would you come into my life? Would you cleanse me of the power and guilt of my sin? Make me right with you so that my life's now eternal. I walk with you in this world and eternally. So that's the good news of Jesus, that we're not dead to sin, but we're alive in Christ's second life. So that key card access, it can be for a closed family system. It can also be for a credentialed position. I used to be a school teacher. I had a badge that would get me into a high school. I don't now, but there are other people who do. Teachers can get into a high school. If you work at a company, you may have a badge or a pass card that gets you into your company's building. You have access to a place that's shut off. Third thing is background. All of us have backgrounds in our life. Some of them we have good ones. Some of them we have ones that we wish didn't exist. If you're a person who's had addiction in your life and you're in recovery, you have access to a group of people with a background that I don't have access to. I'm not in recovery. I pray for my friends in recovery, but I don't have the ability to bring the gospel to them in the way that you do. If you've gone through something really difficult in your life, a tragedy, a divorce, anything you want to choose, you now have access to be able to speak into the lives of other people with that same experience. If you're someone who served in the military, you now are part of a background group and you have access to be able to bond and get to know and share the gospel with that group of people that are shut off. If you're from the state of Texas, where everyone thinks that they need to be their own country, and you meet another Texan, you now have an opportunity to speak to a group of people and have access. Do you get the point? So here's the question. We see in this letter that the gospel went from Philippi all the way to Caesar's household, a place that they saw was shut off. What shut off place do you have access to? What shut off place, family system, job, field, background, what have you been given access to that you can now, in embracing your purpose, say, wow, I have access to this, I can use it for the Lord? What place do you have access to? The Apostle Paul wants us to be very clear here that purpose is our central self-organizing life aim. The pastor can't bring the gospel into those places. The pastor can be your cheerleader and pray for you, but you can. I want to put it all together, and I want to put it all together this way. This past week, I was driving with my 4-year-old. My 4-year-old's name is Henry, and we were getting ready to go to preschool, and this has nothing to do with preschool. We're driving along, and to drive with my son, Henry, in the car, you will learn very quickly that he wants to listen to heavy metal. Now, I want to be clear, he defines heavy metal very differently than a music critic would. Henry's definition of heavy metal is very loud guitars and very fast drums. If it meets that, it's heavy metal. And he has a playlist on Spotify. It's called Henry Rock OG. And so we put it on there. And for example, when we drove down to conference, we listened to all of Van Halen 1, Van Halen 2, and Diver Down, and Stairway to Heaven, and etc. And he really liked it. And that was great. And he loves it. If you come into our house, he walks around singing a Judas Priest song, Breaking the Law, Breaking the Law. Okay? So you get the point. But the challenge is parenting this little 4-year-old is getting harder because he constantly wants to hear new music. And I'm running out of ideas. So we're driving the car. He's like, Dad, I want a new heavy metal song. And I'm sitting there being like, I don't know anymore. And then I'm like, okay, Henry, there's a song that came out when I was in 8th grade. It's by a band called Switchfoot. It's called Meant to Live. I think you'll like it. And I put it on. And he really likes it. And we listen to it once, we listen to it twice, we listen to it. And the third time, he's singing along to the chorus. We were meant to live for so much more. Have we lost ourselves? And we turn it off. He's like, I like that. Now let's hear Breaking the Law. And then we move on. And then I get him to school, and the day goes on, and hours and hours and hours go by, and it comes time to bedtime. And now we do Bible time downstairs as the family of 4, which is our ritual. And then it's time to get the kids upstairs to their rooms. Each kid goes with a grown-up. Henry goes with me that night. We go up, brush his teeth, go into his room. We first read his Roald Dahl book. Then we have a chance to pray and sing and do the Lord's Prayer. And then he says this, Daddy, I want to tell you something. What's that, buddy? I have a question. Okay. What does it mean we're meant to live for so much more? Now, it had been like hours since we listened to that song, and I thought the focus of the car ride had become other things, but apparently he'd been wondering this all day. I said, okay, you want to talk about this now? It's kind of late. He's like, yeah, I want to know. It's like, okay. Now I'm sitting and thinking, I have to explain some heavy theological stuff to a 4-year-old who's tired and had preschool today, but let's try it. So I say, okay, buddy. God created things and they were good. For example, hold up your hands. And he held up his hands. I said, what does God want us to do with hands? And Henry loves construction and trucks and stuff. So he said, build. I said, great. So building and helping, that's creative and good, and that's part of God's design. We were meant to live for that sort of thing, to help and to make a difference, because whose love is in our heart? Jesus' love. Okay, yes, buddy. What's a way that we use our hands for something not good? He said, hitting. I said, exactly. So you got it. I said, so here's the idea, is that everybody on earth We're meant to live for a greater purpose for Jesus, to help others, to love him and to worship him and make a difference. But do we all do that? And he said, no. I said, okay, does that answer your question? And he goes, yeah, Daddy. And then he got really quiet. And I thought maybe he was just getting tired. So I let him I thought maybe we were just winding down. And he goes, after probably like 30 seconds, which is a long time for a 4-year-old. But he has this look on his face. So I don't interrupt him. I'm just letting him speak. You know, Daddy, I'd really like to live for so much more. And I say to him, me too, buddy. What about you? As we're coming into a new season, what is your purpose? Are you finding that you're living for Jesus, that you're valuing the individuals that God has put in your life, that you're seeking community actively, and you're seeing the power of the gospel? What have you made your primary purpose? We're about to take communion. When you came in today, you may have gotten elements. If not, ushers are going to come down. Communion is many things, and one thing is it's a memorial dinner, and it's an opportunity for us to see that we have a higher primary purpose, that we have a higher calling, that those of us who love Jesus are not just image bearers, but children of God. He makes us family together. When we take communion, it's a reminder that we're not just part of all the common stuff about just, hey, I can't reconcile my past. Hey, I just have a busy calendar. Hey, I just need to feel good. No, the Lord brought his disciples together on the night that he gave himself up for us. And he took common elements and he said, these are not common. They have a higher purpose. They show us something greater. This is my body broken for you. And he said, take and eat this in remembrance of me. Let's take the bread together. And at the end of the meal, he took the cup. Again, a common element. And he showed the higher purpose. He said, drink from this, all of you. This is my blood, the blood of the new covenant, poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. Let's drink it and be thankful. What have you made your primary purpose today? I'm going to invite you simple this week. Pray this prayer every day. In the morning and at night. Lord, help me today live for Jesus. And then at the end, Lord, help me today live for Jesus. Let's stand and sing together.